What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Tuesday night edition of Jackson Kayak Dock Talk, the one, the only show with the expert panel of the Jackson Kayak anglers that filled our team. But without further ado, oh, and this is part two, by the way, in case some of you haven't watched the first episode on YouTube, go check it out and then come watch this one. But anyway, let's kick this thing off. Welcome back, everybody. So, to catch you guys up on what you missed last time, we started in on fall fishing and then the hole got deep. We went down a rabbit hole that is like no other. So, to catch you up, we have Joey Monteleone down at the bottom, established author, has written, what are you book number four
Number
or three?
four.
Four, number four. So, then we've got Travis Myers, who's written several items for In Fisherman and various other places. Both well established anglers that have been in this game a very, very long time and have a lot of great tips and tricks for you guys at home. So, if you guys haven't listened to the first episode, again, I encourage you to go check out episode 43, part one, and then check out episode 43, part two, or just hang out with us for the entire episode as it is. But one of the things that we got to talking about, gentlemen, was lure customization. Joey, you talked a lot about how you customize your spinner baits, but let's talk about some of the other lures in your guys' tackle box that you maybe tweak just a little bit to help you get a few extra bites. It can give the folks at home the ins and the outs. You can give them just a little bit. I'll let you guys decide there. Travis, we'll start with you maybe on something that you customize a little bit.
Um, wow. Well, today was a great example. But I probably had 8 to 9 different Yamamoto plastics with us today, and some of them had been altered. A great majority of them in some way, some fashion. Whether or not be some of them are, well, case in point, like the historic double tail hula grub. A great percentage of the time, I take the legs off of that and I rig that so it can backglide toward fish when I raise my rod tip to them, and it's falling right back toward them. Instead of going away from them, it falls right back into their face. I got into on that first episode, gentlemen, I got into salt content and how that affects drop. And today was a great example. It really was. We're fishing largely a lot of the same areas I fish in the winter because we've had 4 nights in the 40s here in the last week. And we're only in September. And then fish were actually setting up like it was November today. They really were. Steep ledge holes, into 10 foot plus the water. And I just for the heck of it today, we rotated through more baits than I have in probably 15 years. And it wasn't because I knew we were on them. And it wasn't necessarily to see what they would bite. I was curious what they wouldn't bite. And the stuff that really came through was that slow drop rate where it was just hanging in the column. And a lot of that comes from leaching the salt out of, a lot of heavily salted baits. 2.5-inch Yama Tanuki today, 4-inch Senko, 4-inch wood grub without the tails on it. All that played. And they ate it all, but if I threw a Senko out of the pack today, it was getting ignored. plain and simple. And if it hung in the column, and I got into the last episode how it leaches salt out of those baits, and I let it, pretty much suspend. I've got it down now where I can suspend Senko, like a 4-inch Senko. I can get it to hang in about 3.5, 4 foot of water, and it's not going to the bottom. It's not going anywhere. It just hangs right in her face. That was lethal today. But the stuff that went straight to the bottom today and kind of plummeted, they weren't on it. Case in point, and just like Mr. Monteleone touch on, you spend enough time on the water, it's those little tweaks, and it really comes into it. And it's this time on the water and being observant while you're on the water.
Yeah, I love hearing Travis talk about this stuff because it's a mirror of some of the things that I've learned over the course of the years. And you can tell a good fisherman, as he was saying, I tried a bunch of different things. Pete, I would catch a couple of fish on a buzzbait, and then I'd start throwing something else. And somebody said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "I want to see how many different baits I can catch a fish on." When you're confident in what you're doing, it does make a difference. And the other thing is, when Travis was talking about, how you change baits, I got a lot of respect for somebody that does all the work that he's doing. And for me, some of the times what I do is I'll take, like, for example, I'm a big fan of the Rage Tail. There's a color called Roadkill, number 229, and it's kind of a moss green. And and normally I wouldn't do this, but I took a Spike It pen, an orange one, and touched up the claws. And those claws it really does look like a crawfish. It kind of changes that. The garlic smell, I smell garlic. I'm Italian. I smell garlic all the time. But the garlic smell, I don't know if I don't worry too much about scent. I know other people do, and I'm cool with that. But some of the other things that I'll do, I had a hard time getting anybody to ever make a red hook. And I started talking about this probably a quarter of a century ago. I couldn't get anybody to make a red hook. And I used the Daiichi red trebles on my crankbaits and my topwater baits. And I put those on the front hook. And I may have said this the last time, but I can tell you that I have a $1 bet with anybody. Anytime they want to challenge me, that for every fish I catch that's not on the red hook, I'll give them $1. For every one I catch that's on the red hook, they give me $1. It happens. That little subtle red really does work. And you mentioned the spinnerbait thing, and I know we did that last time, but I will tell you that more recently what I've done is take a number 7 Indiana blade, more of a teardrop blade, and put that on my spinnerbait. They were absolutely hammering that yesterday and again today. And I had 2 over 5 yesterday on it. So that tells you right there, that's the proof that it's working, for me anyway.
And Travis really alluded to the biggest weather change that we've had this season. And you can really tell a big difference. I mean, it definitely queued things up. Let's just say, I think the other day it was 42. When I was out and about at 5:30 in the morning, it was plenty cool enough. It was good old fashioned sweatshirt weather here in Indiana, sweatshirt and shorts, of course. But talking about colors, Joey, how much do you feel that color matters in bait selection as you move through the seasons?
Well, I thought about, when we talked about this, I thought about Travis because he's fishing cold water, which is generally clearer water, but he's fishing a river like I do when I get a chance, that when you get a little bit of rain turns dark. So I kind of match the conditions. And one of the biggest indicators for me is I look at watercolor, which is, again, and everybody, it goes from crystal clear or gin clear to just flat out, too wet to plow. That's really, really muddy. And for me, I guess I start looking at that. And one of the things, I did a post today on Facebook saying that the rain that we're going to get is going to muddy up the water. And usually bass go shallow and muddy water. And then if you are throwing a spinnerbait or something, you want to have that to where you can see those blades turning. So in muddy water, it's going to be shallow. In clear water, it's going to be a little bit deeper. So, water clarity matters. Look at the trout fishermen. I mean, they sneak up on trout in these crystal clear streams because they see everything. So, bass have really good eyesight, have, more rods and cones in their eyes than human beings do. So color matters. I think that for me, just me, I believe that retrieve speed matters a lot more than color does. And then and random action. I said that the last time, and I'm just a firm believer in those two things: random action and retrieve speed. A good presentation overcomes any color difference, or I believe it does anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And talking about the river, Travis, is there anything that you want to add there? You feel pretty good about what Joey brought to the table?
Yeah, I totally agree with that in spades, across the line. I think probably one of the biggest things that I've passed on over the years is my color selection in regards to largely being a finesse guy, just because, day in, day out, at least where I fish, finesse rules. And that's why I spent so much time over the years, writing about it. And anything that I can't see on the bottom is probably pretty close to where I want to be color-wise. Probably Saturday morning, I plan on doing about a 3-mile wade. And I can guarantee you that I'm almost going to be stepping on stuff that smallmouth eat that I can't see. They don't want to get stepped on. So that's the only reason I'm seeing them, is because they're dispersing. And those, big smallmouth, your 20 inches and up fish and crystal clear water in the river systems. I mean, they've got marbles for eyes, and they will study something, go tail down on something, and if it's out of whack, I mean, off they go. And if I can't see something without squinting to see it on the bottom, lure color-wise, in my finesse game, I probably need to change something up. And I'm really adamant about that. Case in point, I mean, today was 85 degrees and clear sun. And I mean, I was having a hard time looking at and seeing stuff, past about 9 feet. And that's about, just about right. If that was sticking out to me like a sore thumb, there would have been issues there, I'm sure. And the fish know it. 24/7, that's their wheelhouse, study and pray. And, I'm really big on stuff that I can't see. And I'm really pretty adamant about that as the seasons change. A lot of my darker hues will come into play like November, December. Those colder days when we get more leaf substrate, coming down and filtering through our river systems and everything. I go to a lot of black in December. Some kind of laminate. I am big on laminates. There's very few things in nature that are all one color. So I am really big into that with my my finesse game. Where even my hair jigs, any of that stuff, I want two-tone. I want a lighter colored underbelly on any of my plastics, and that mottled camouflage look on the back is largely what I go for.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
I did a lot of interviews for this this most recent book that should be out by the end of the week, and I interviewed some world-class anglers, some local and some names you might have heard before: Rick Clunn, Bill Dance, those kind of guys. And I asked them about, of course, I wanted to know about their first fish, but really more important to me was their biggest fish, because that's the two fish everybody always remembers. And when you ask them about the biggest fish they ever caught, probably 80 or 85% of those people were talking about jigs, plastics that were either pumpkin pepper or watermelon, and, Travis was talking about this, the stuff that blends in. I was fishing with Doug Hannon many, many years ago, and we were in Florida at his home, and I was pitching, and he suggested that I pitch a root beer colored tube. Now, if you've ever seen tannic acid stained water in a root beer tube, it looks, it's almost like it blends in. And I said, okay. So I started pitching by boat docks, And I said, man, I'm catching a bunch of fish. It doesn't make sense to me. He said, it's a subtlety that they sense that movement. So it's not that in your face, not to say that chartreuse doesn't work or a bright red doesn't work. There's times for that. And I just had to smile when Travis was talking about black. Black and June bug down here in the wintertime are the two drop dead colors for sure. So subtle is good. Yeah. Subtle is always going to be good. And, the things, when he was talking about the baits that suspend and stay in the strike zone, exactly why a jerk bait works, because it's right there in front of them. They just can't stand it.
Yep.
Very good, very good. So let's talk about the watercolor just a little bit. Joey, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, especially in the area that the three of us kind of inhabit. We're going to have could have some pretty substantial rains coming in here this weekend. What changes do you think that are going to happen as far as your lure presentation and the things that you're going to be fishing with as this water muddies up if we get as much rain as they potentially say that we may through here in the Midwest?
Well, we're catching a bunch of fish in the grass. The frog bite in the grass, and if there's a better bite than that, I'm not sure what it is, but I absolutely love that frog bite. And the grass will just get a little bit, we've got low water, bright skies and sun, and the grass is growing. So that grass will be covered up a little bit more. It's a great situation for running, whether it's a frog or a spinnerbait. And by the way, if you're gonna fish a frog for people, if you're gonna use straight braid like I do, you want to mark that line about every inch with a black magic marker. And then when you're tying that on, I tie a Palomar knot and back it up with a clinch knot, just because braid has a tendency to kind of let loose a little bit. So that's usually to back that up. And if you want to trim those feet, or I don't want to call them legs because there's strands, but trim them unevenly, one side shorter than the other. And if you've ever heard of walk the dog, that's how you walk the frog. And boy, you want to talk about explosive bites, especially now. Our water temperature dropped just like you guys. I'm sure your water temperature dropped. Ours dropped in 3 days. It dropped 3 degrees. So that really kind of got them active yesterday and again today. So watercolor is going to matter. I mean, they'll go shallow and they're still going to eat. So, give them a day or two. If the water gets really muddy, give them a day or two. And then if they slow down a little bit, they're going to be ready to eat on that second or third day.
That's really good advice. So not only that, but you talk about the water temperature starting to fall. That thermocline for a lot of us is going to start to swap places here. We're going to get that fall turnover, as they like to call it. Travis, I'll start with you. It may be a little bit different out on the river, and I think this is both good segues here. But how will the turnover affect your fishing? Is that something where you just keep on grinding, or pack it up and go home once you see the signs of, the water turning over?
Now, November 3rd, that time change. November 3rd, as soon as we turn those clocks back, quite honestly, from then probably right till about the first of the year, I've got some of the best fishing I've got all year. I key on wintering holes, those places with a movable bottom structure that should, Mother Nature kick up any kind of flurry or whatever in rising river, flows this fall whatsoever. It's not going to affect those fish. They've got refuge. No, I say bring it. I'm ready for that. I call it pre-winter, but
yeah.
I'm ready. So that's when I get some of the biggest fish I get all year. So,
how about you, Joe? What are you guys typically looking at for when your lake turns over and the thermocline busts and things change up a little bit for that first weekend or week?
Well, and I may do this a little different than everybody else, but I'm a big fan of wood. It stays 24/7. It grows algae. The bait fish move in on it. And I absolutely love. And, I get to spend a lot of time on the water, been retired for 12, 13 years. But before that, I was fishing 75 or 100 days a year after work. not good for relationships. So boy, is it fun to fish that much. But I've really come to love what I call the deflection bite. And I start talking about the green weeds, and green is good, brown is bad. So a lot of times I'll run a deep crankbait to find the deeper green weed beds. If I pull up brown, I move to the next spot. But when you're throwing to wood, it stays all the time, and everything gravitates to wood. And I like to go to steep banks with large submerged trees, especially if they've fallen part way and they're still part on the bank and at about a 45-degree angle. And love to throw that square bill crankbait and a spinnerbait. And even in that grass, when something pulls through the grass like a chatterbait, and when Travis was talking about this, they've got to eat. I always say everything eats in October, but he's right. October and November, when people are in the woods hunting deer, let me tell you something. I do both of them. You can hunt early morning, fish in the afternoon, and go back and hunt the evening hunt if you want to do that. But that deflection bite, that crankbait bite, especially, the fish are going to be schooled up. The bait's going to be schooled up, and they're going to be chasing because they've got to eat. So, natural colors, Travis talked about that earlier. And, so natural colors. And again, that finding that right retrieve speed is really a key, especially even in the fall. I mean, when you get it right, when they're aggressive, there's no way to do it wrong when they're aggressive. That only happens about 10% of the time. So the rest of the time, you just keep feeling your way around till you figure it out, and then be prepared to change, because it does. So, I keep plastics in my pocket. He was talking about all the Yamamoto stuff, and I keep plastics in my pocket because I know what I'm going to fish. And I've got 3 different kinds of plastics in my pocket. I don't have to reach for them. I got them right there where I can do that. So, the fall is a great time, especially for a big fish.
Yep.
Mr. Yarworth, what asked a question from the audience? What are your favorite creature baits that you guys use?
Well, Rage Tail makes a bunch of different baits that I believe in. It doesn't matter whether somebody's a sponsor or not. I can get what I want anyway. It doesn't matter to me much anymore. And they seem to come out with something different every year. I'm a really big fan, believe this or not, of just the Rage Tail craws. Especially smallmouth, and both of them really like crawfish. So I kind of stick with a crawfish, but there's always something new that comes out that you kind of believe in. And that menace tail from Strike King. Matter of fact, I've got he's got menace tail worms that are about 7 inches long and got that double tail on them that I've quickly become a fan of. Debbie caught last year. She caught an 8-pound bass on one of them. So that'll make you a fan pretty quick.
How about you, Travis? What's your favorite creature baits that you're using out there?
Quite honestly, there's not a lot of conditions that I face that call for that. Greatest percentage of the time, I think more appendages are a negative Q to the smallmouth, at least where I target them, or where I have targeted them on the East Coast. I think there's more to be looked at there and inspected. And no, it almost goes back to the old Berkeley study where they studied crawdad looking baits with sans the pinchers on them compared to ones without, and which were more readily taken. Probably about as crazy as I get is, the old, classic is a Yamamoto double tail hula grub. That's just a classic drag bait. And I've got some lead where I'll drag that through deep timber and everything, and it will not hang. And that's a big fish bait when they're looking down for me. But as far as the creature bait thing, that's about as crazy as I go. But I've always got those with me. They're always with me. So
and I look at things, and again, being older than everybody else. And next week on the radio, I'm doing antique baits in new places, where I talk about fishing baits that have been around. If they've been around 40 or 50 or 60
right.
years, those work.
Right.
And you can go back in and you can talk about the Charlie Brewer slider. You can talk about the original plastic worms that were around 70 years ago, the cream worms. They made 2 colors, purple and black. You know what the best 2 colors are? Purple and black. I think people, and this isn't a criticism, but I think sometimes people kind of make us a little bit too fancy. That you can go back and a friend of mine, Tony Evans, talks all the time about former Jackson Kayak employee, talks about all the time, the right bait in the right hands, that's what catches fish. And if you believe in that, in a straight tail worm, that's good. As long as there's bass and bass fishermen, that 5, 6, 7-inch worm is going to catch fish without a doubt.
Yeah.
That's about as fact as you can get. It'll always be a game of movers and shakers, and that's all it is. You've got some baits that move, you got some baits that shake, and nothing under the water. I mean, as far as the bait that's in there has really changed. They still eat crawls, they still eat shad, they still eat bait fish of any kind. Talking about that, what are your guys' favorite bait fish to kind of look for as far as, the moving bait bite goes?
Well, today when I was fishing, and I didn't post this yet, but I found some little baby bluegill, and I know what happened. A bass ran through a bunch of a little school of baby, it was this year's fry, I believe. And, the bluegill pattern is something a lot of people don't bother with, but I'll tell you, if I can find bluegill beds, I fish those hard because everything raids those bluegill beds. Everything does. I mean, I also look for the shad, because it's when you have a school of shad, you're going to have fish following them. They're going to be some, and if they blow up, I keep that spinnerbait handy to throw when they're blowing up on that school of shad. And one tip that I tell people all the time, if your shad are 1.5 inches long, don't throw a spinnerbait with 1.5 inch blade. Throw a spinnerbait with a 3-inch blade, because otherwise it get lost in that school of 500 shad. That thing gets lost. What you really want to do is differentiate, from that and bigger. I still believe this: bigger bait, bigger bite, bigger fish. And I know people will argue with that. I'm okay with it, but I've got I've got proof usually at the end of my line that's a criteria that works.
Great answer. How about you, Travis? As far as bait fish goes, what are you typically looking for out on the river?
For me, it'd be juvenile suckers and mad toms, which are essentially, they look like about a 3 to 4 inch baby catfish, bottom dwelling fish, sculpin. Those are my big ones right there. Maybe juvenile chubs. Starting right about that first week November, latter part of October, but even more importantly, around that time change, first week of November and everything, our fish really get on larger bait fish. They kind of get off the crawdad thing, stuff that's dragged, and there's a definite preference for those 4, 5, 6 inch long, calorie rich bait fish. Now, a lot, in a lot of part of the country, bait fish are going to be up in the column. They're going to be something moving through the column, or, in river smallmouth vernacular, a lot of our bait fish are dragged. I'm not sponsored by them, but I'll tell you right now, as soon as that time change happens, I'm dragging a sculpin bait. Whether it be on a football head or North Branch tackle makes a heck of a head that you cannot wedge, and it's called a sled head, and it's pretty famous here on the East Coast for people fishing around rock. But probably before anyone knew who they were, X-Zone Lures offered one heck of a baby sculpin bait, and they still do. And I can tell you right now, drag that around in fall on your wintering holes. And I mean, I've got no ties to them, but I can tell you that I own about 15 pounds of their sculpin baits, because they're a big fish bait. I mean, they just are. Telling it like it is. I'm going outside the Yamamoto lines.
Some great stuff come out of X-Zone Lures here lately. It's a great company, great newer and up and coming. How's that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think 2014, 2013, I started using that bait that I'm talking about, and it still works. I mean, it just does, and you know.
I'm gonna throw you guys both a curveball here because I feel like it's time for a curveball just a little bit. You guys are well seasoned veterans. You guys have fished with a lot of people
He's calling us
over the
old.
years. Well seasoned. Well seasoned. So if you guys could at this point in the game, if you could go fishing with anybody, who would it be? Spend the day on the water.
Ooh. I got a couple. Probably a couple.
Joey?
Oh, okay. I was waiting for Travis. I'm pretty lucky. I've gotten to fish with a lot of really, I mean, some great fishermen, a lot of people that people would recognize. When it all comes down to it, to be honest with you, I've enjoyed watching my kids catch their biggest fish, and certainly my wife catch her biggest fish. Debbie has turned into a fishaholic. I mean, we and I'm repeating myself, but we fish 100 days a year, and a lot of people say, "Man, where'd you find a woman like that?" It's like she found me. I mean, that was one of the things that she was attracted to, was the fact that I fished a lot. You know, as far as people that fish with, probably the most enjoyable people that I've ever been around would be Bill Dance. I enjoyed fishing with Rick Clunn. I really enjoyed fishing with Doug Hannon. Doug was an absolute genius and an inventor and an author. And probably I learned more from him than I did anybody else. As far as sheer fun, Homer Circle, who fished until he was 97, was probably as much fun as anybody. My dreams have all come true, to be honest with you. I enjoy, and every once in a while, believe this or not, I like to fish by myself. I just enjoy that solitary, got the river to myself kind of a thing. And it's no knock on anybody else. You know, there's times, people would say they wanted to fish with me, and I'd say, well, I'll put you on the list. There's about 400 people ahead of you. And if I called them up and said, hey, I'm going to fish Wednesday and Thursday. Oh, well, I can't. I hate to knock you out of fishing. I said, oh, don't worry. You're not knocking me out of fishing. I'm going. It's just that you're not going.
I like it. All right, Travis, lay it on us. Who's your go-to?
You know, I got to be honest with you. When I got into the fishing thing, it was largely I was probably kind of fed up with team sports because I had a lot of people on my teams growing up through high school that didn't really put forth the effort that I wanted them to. So fishing's never been a social event for me. Quite honestly, I haven't fished with a lot of people through the years. Not that I've got a lot of people knocking my door down. I mean, I'll go fishing with anybody. Most notably, people that kind of leave their ego at the door and maybe ask me questions about how to get, better in the river game and stuff like that. And I appreciate those people doing that. I probably got 3, quite honestly. If I could turn the clock back, I would have liked to have spent even half a day on the water with Billy Westmoreland, maybe Charlie Brewer, because I've read every word that both of those gentlemen ever had published about them, and both of them largely being finesse guys, I kind of gravitate toward that. I would still like to spend some time with my buddy Ned Cady out in Kansas, one day on the water with him. And I've actually talked to him about doing that. I would like to do that. And I don't want time to go on and be like, well, I should have done something. I want to do it. I don't want to look back on something and say, well, heck, I had the opportunity to do something, and for whatever reason, I didn't do it. I would much rather have that memory of being a fond one where I did it. And I would like to get on the water with Ned. and here's an oddball one, and it's my last one, but there's a gentleman up in Canada right now on the Jackson team that's kind of taken a shine to this podcast thing. And
Mr. Adam.
Mr. Adam. And I would like to get a couple days on the water with him and pass down what I know to him, because I know he's hungry.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that he's left his ego at the door a few times when he's messaged me about different things. And he's just an all-around great guy. I know we'd mesh really well. And I would like to leave something after I'm gone, that would benefit someone in this thing that we've all got so much time in. And that would be an honor for me.
I love that you said that, because that's exactly what spurred me on to write books, is because
that was my next question.
Yeah. I'm 73. I told you the last time, I don't even buy green bananas anymore. So it's one of those, for me, it's one of those things that all these things that we've learned, whether it's from somebody else or like in Travis's case, that there's no question in my mind, he's got the same blood flowing through him as I do. We're river rats. We love that. Yeah. In my email, it says there's magic in moving water. And, I really do believe that. And I've been quoted and have it stolen and whatever else. But yeah, no, there's no question about that. And that's the legacy we're leaving behind. And that's why I get kind of excited. I mean, I could be doing a lot of things. People said, well, I think I'll write a book. And I said, yeah, go ahead. If you think it's easy, believe me when I tell you it's not.
Oh, man, let's back up the truck just for a second, because I got a question that I want to ask you both before we get too deep into this. What inspired you guys to both want to write? I know through different podcasts that I listen to, and I'm always intrigued by the stories of how people got interested in writing and they wanted to take writing as a path into the outdoors. How did you guys become interested? Was there a certain person that influenced it, or just something reading various pieces of literature that made you say, man, I'd like to have myself published one day?
Well, that's a great question. And here's a terrible answer. I was reading a magazine one time, and it was counter to everything that I had experienced and I believed. And if you get enough, thanks, Christian. Says I don't look a day over 60. I think that's karate and kayaking that does that. But it was counter to everything that I believed, and I thought to myself, I'm going to write an article. And I wrote my article and sent it to Bassmaster, and people said, really? And they said, did it reject it? I said, no, they bought it. The very first thing I wrote, they bought. So for me, and then when you start experiencing stuff, what you really want to do is, if you have the heart of a teacher, you want to pass that on to somebody else so they get to experience that exact same thing. If you've ever done a seminar and you're out there and you look over that seminar crowd, and as you're talking to them, they're doing exactly what Chad's doing. People are going like this. They're nodding in agreement, that they felt that, they sense that. So you want to pass that on. You don't get a lot of chances to do that. In a book, it could be 2:00 in the morning. You can be on an airplane. You can be whatever. You can. So I still cherish having that book to hold. And, you don't get rich doing TV, and you don't get rich doing radio. You don't get rich doing, writing books. You get rich by doing all of those. So that's what kind of got me going. And again, I wanted to pass those things on and have people, again, experience the same thing that I did and get the joy out of it that I did.
Yeah.
That's good. How about you, Travis? Was there anything that stuck out to you that made you want to submit things to In Fisherman, or just...
I think probably for me, it was kind of a combination of I'm not a tournament guy. I've never delved into the tournament scene, and so much that's pervasive in the written word as it pertains to bass fishing it is rooted into the tournament scene. And what I saw from writers like Charlie Brewer and Ned Cady were individuals that were not so much offering a magic prescription to go out and catch fish, any time, But what they were offering are some basic guidelines that probably up your odds for a lifelong of fulfillment to be able to do just that. And that's largely where I felt compelled that there is a different style of fishing than just from glass boats and, you know, tackle that could take lake trout out of the basket. I mean, you know, that's where my love of submitting stuff with Ned came from. Was whether you were 16 years old or 66 and you were stepping into a river, I was trying to offer, you know, stuff that would essentially up your odds of being able to have an enjoyable day. And when it all comes down to it, that's what it's all about. At least it is for me. The most memorable days that I still have on the water are those with people that have either come to fish with me from out of state that we're trying to learn something, or I'm on the water with my wife and we're trying to outfish each other. You know, that's fun for me. And fishing should be fun. It shouldn't be drama. And I'm not about drama. I you know, my day job takes care of enough thoughts on that standpoint. So, you know, fishing for me is it will and always will be in my blood, no matter what. And I welcome anyone to contact me. I love talking about it, you know, whether a phone call or email or whatever. You know, and quite honestly, some of the best relationships that I have in the fishing industry are individuals that contacted me and left their ego at the door, that read something that I wrote with Ned, and they've come fish with me. And that's awesome. That's what it's all about for me. If I could shave 10, 15, 20 years off of their learning curve, I wish somebody did that for me.
So now, as times have changed and different things, and now we've got all these podcasts out there. We alluded to Adams. Obviously, there's this one and so many more. I mean, every day there's a new podcast out there.
Yeah.
Kids are going to hopefully find these, or new up and comers are going to find these podcasts. Hopefully, years after we're all said and done. What message would you leave to that interested person that's maybe starting their fishing journey, and just kind of getting their feet wet and wanting to learn as much as possible? Either one of you can go. Whoever starts talking first gets the big box.
I think probably the best thing that I could pass along is, and I often say this in my line of work, where in my line of work, we've all worked with officers that throughout the years, we took a little bit from and tried to make it our own and put it into our toolbox to make us a better officer. And in the fishing game, I did just that. I couldn't tell you who someone's current sponsors are. I couldn't tell you what state they reside in on the tournament scene, but I can darn well tell you what, you know, ounce jig head that Ned Cady prefers to throw and what color and everything in the winter when he's targeting fish, you know, in the finesse game. And I gravitated toward people that I thought were successful on the water over X amount of months that were outside the tournament game. And I think if someone were new to this, you know, for heaven's sakes, look at those lures, just like Mr. Monteleone has touched on a couple times, both in our first and second episode here. Those lures that have been around for ages are probably, there's a reason behind that. There's no marketing behind them. They just continue to sell and they continue to catch. You know, don't think that leafing through a Bassmaster magazine is your path to success. I'm living proof that that's not the case. I can tell you. I could name half a dozen old time names, and I studied everything that they ever put out, and I tried to emulate that. And quite honestly, the stuff worked. Your Dan Gapins, your Charlie Brewers and stuff like that. Those, you don't hear about those names anymore. But I can guarantee you, one of the first things that I tell anyone that wants to get into the river smallmouth game, pick up Charlie Brewer's book on slider fishing and learn about drop rate.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of is a global thought, and I enjoy hearing Travis talk because it's almost like a mirror of me 15 years ago. That when we're talking about these things, that I quite honestly, I still get excited every day when I push that kayak off, and people say, "Well, you could have a big boat." Yep, sure could have it for nothing.
Yep.
I don't want a big boat. I want to paddle a kayak. I want to be close to nature. I want to feel that drift. And I still get excited. I still play with baits. I still, go back and experiment. And, the only way you get really good at this, and, if you've never felt that, the tug of a 6 or 7 pound fish, once you do that, I don't want to say you're hooked because it sounds too goofy, but I'll tell you, it's something you'll never forget. And you want to be able to go back and do that. You want to be able to go back and have repeatable results. And, if you have a passion for this, and obviously we all do, and the people that are listening, I hope they do also in viewing, I hope they have a passion for this, because when you find what it is you were born to do, you need to chase that hard. You need to stay with it. You need to study it. You need to experiment. You need to dive into it headlong. And if you don't mind, I want to kind of do a little bit of a reversal here and talk about one of the things, and I'm sure Travis, we talk about all these things we're doing right. Sometimes, I did some things about what people do wrong, myself included, because if there's a mistake, I've made it. And today, when I was sitting there, I ran a spinnerbait across a tree, and then I felt, because I use monofilament on my spinnerbaits, and I felt that, and I said, I could probably throw this again. I said, nope, I'm going to retie it, because I've had the bad story already, so I stop and retie. This is a good time. We're going into what I call second season to go back in and lube those reels, change that line, inspect the rod guides, clean up the handles, go back in and put new skirts on your spinnerbaits and your jigs, find some baits that you want to play with, dig deep in that tackle box stuff that you haven't thrown that worked years ago and you haven't thrown. And one little tip I'd give people, I've seen this and it just drives me crazy. And I'm not trying, I've got a lot of fishing rods. I'm a lucky guy. Got a lot of fishing rods. And I see people, I'll be out with them and see them reel something up and I hear that click of the jig head or the slip sinker. And every time you hear that click, know this, you're weakening the tip of that rod. And it's only a matter of time. If you fish a lot, that rod tip's going to break off and somebody's going to say, well, I don't know. Didn't really do anything. Yep, you did it. You did it 1,000 times and that's what'll break that. Don't reel it all the way up to the tip.
We've all been there and done that one. Even on accident. Did it freeze?
Yeah, we did freeze for a second.
Yeah.
That's
but
our
no,
first
I
freeze.
mean, shoot. I hate it when you look down at your stack of rods and I get 4 or 5 in front of me a lot of times and I shouldn't. But then I'll look down and like I've bumped one and it's all jammed up at the end. And that's always fun. I love that. Looking down and seeing all your stuff all tangled up too. That's good. I need to do better, but I don't. And I probably won't. I like to just have all 6 rods just laying out there, just tangled up. Keeps everything fun and interesting.
And you know what you find out, Chad, is, and I think Travis would echo this, the better you get, the less you carry. I carry 2 Plano 3600 tackle boxes. I already know what I'm going to throw. I got a pocket full of plastic, and I've got a couple of spinner baits, a buzz bait, and a couple of crankbaits, some 1.5 and some number 3s that'll dive 6, 8, 10 feet. That's what I'm going to throw. I don't need the rest of that stuff. All it does is confuse people. And for me, I already know. So, and when you get it down to 2 or 3, I left today with 3 rods. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I didn't really light them up. I caught 7 fish. None of them were big. Yesterday was my big fish day. Debbie had 1 over 6. I had 2 over 5. So I already know what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to put that spinnerbait, as long as I keep hammering it, I'm not going to put it down, and people will say, well, when do you stop throwing it? I said, when they stop biting it, I'll stop throwing it.
Now, I will say this. So I do kind of do both. My NAR is typically got more stuff in it. It's got the electronics, it's got lights, it's got the batteries, it's got all the fun stuff. Now my Kusa X, on the other hand, is a little bit different. No electronics. It's more Joey style, and there's nothing. It's under seat bag with uh, terminal tackle box, some plastics, some extra line, pliers, fish grips, the basic needs of life. But man, it's fun. It is fun to do both. But I think the funnest is actually being out there with the minimal gear. At the end of the day, I think that there's something more satisfying, maybe a little more spiritual about having that boat that's just set up to just be minimal.
Yeah, the less complicated, I think you feel it's kind of like when you pull up to a spot and you take a look at it. And I guarantee you, both of you have done this. You'll pull up to a spot, look at it, and you change baits, and the first cast you catch a fish. That to me right there says, I know what I'm doing. And Travis used the word ego a bunch of times. That's not ego. That's that you are actually computing in your head what that situation is telling you. It looks like it's 8 feet of water. There's weeds. There's wood. I'm going to throw this in there because in the past, this is what's worked for me. And then you catch that fish, and it doesn't really matter at that point. I want to catch big fish. I mean, that's what I'm out there to do. I'm trying to catch a big fish. Today I had a fail. I caught 7 fish. It's still fun. Every fish should be celebrated, but I'm always looking for that big bite. But anytime you can eyeball something and make that adjustment and catch that fish on the first or second cast, that's as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned.
Sometimes that's the rabbit hole, though, is what I've found. I don't know if either of you have had this day where you go out there and you get that bite on that one lure, and then the next 2-3 hours later, you're sitting there on a dry hole. Nothing else wanted that lure. It was the fake pattern of the day. Have you guys ever dealt with that?
A bunch of times. That's why I've got rods rigged up. I don't tie crankbaits on, but I have a game plan when I hit the water. I guarantee you, both of you do too, that I have a game plan when I hit the water. And my confidence bait really has always been a jig, not a plastic worm, even though I've caught a bunch of fish on a plastic worm. I just like the way that jig feels in my hand. I like the fact that I've caught a lot of big fish on it. You can swim it and make it look like a bluegill or make it look like a shad, or you can go back and make it look like a crawfish. So, the jig is my confidence bait. And again, when I pull up, I'll throw 2 or 3 different things. And years ago, when I fished with Homer Circle, he told me that he throws a bait for 10 casts. If it doesn't work, he picks up another one. And one of the things that I took and expanded that a little bit is I start with the quietest bait of those that I'm going to throw first. I'll throw it, 6, 8, 10 times, pick up the next one, the next one, the next one. And if I really believe there's a fish there, I'm sitting that hole. I'm catching that fish.
Like my buddy that I fished the river tournaments with out of the big boat, he says it's principle. We'll sit there for an hour, and it'll get to the point where I'll just sit down on the back seat and go, all right, man, let me know when you're done. We'll move on. You've done beat this one to death. But everybody's got that, buddy, don't they? So as we move through this thing, is there anything that you guys want to add as we round out this last episode? Well, not the last episode, obviously, but part 2 episode for folks at home. Put your eye on the spot, Travis. Put you in the big window.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank Jackson Kayak for having us. It's been awesome. I know I've been on, I think this is 3 or 4 now I've been on, and it's awesome, to have this. And I love, just like Mr. Monteleone would say, we love an audience and stuff. And, giving us the stage to talk about this stuff is awesome. And I want to thank yourself, Mr. Brock, for having us, and Jackson. And all the teammates that show up. Honestly, it's very rare that I catch a live one of these because of my work schedule. But I will say that, I mean, 99% of the time, we've got teammates that show up, and you can see over here in the comment section, we got a lot of teammates here, watching this, and that's awesome. That's a great show of support right there. So I want to thank all them for, tuning in tonight. That's fantastic. It speaks to the strength of Jackson Kayak to me, that we've got teammates that would take time, out of their personal lives and sit here and listen to a couple of older, I didn't say old, I said older guys, talk about fishing is pretty awesome. And I appreciate it.
Well, you touched on this earlier too, that you get to shorten somebody's learning curve, and this is as good as it gets, because I get in real time. We can talk about water temperature from today. That people get, and and nobody's got it all figured out. I learned.
Yep.
Both of you, and whether that's come down here or me come up there, I got to travel a lot and fish in a lot of very unique situations, and I've never been with anybody that I didn't learn something from, and that's not me just being coy. I'm honest about that. I watch somebody else and what they're doing, and it either reinforces something that I already believed, or I learned something new, which, you would think after this many years, I'm not learning anything new, but believe me when I tell you I am. So, yeah, and I like this platform. I really do. Anytime we get to help, and I can tell, again, Travis has got the heart of a teacher. I know Chad does. To me, it's anytime we get to kind of instruct and educate, and maybe every once in a while amuse people and let people, kind of peek inside. I talk about peeking inside my tackle box. I'm more than glad. I don't have any. I won't tell you exactly where I'm fishing all the time, but I'm more than glad to show you what I'm fishing with, what I do to it, how I do it differently. What line I use, why I use it, which rod I use, and the whole thing. I'm more than glad to do that. Again, because I didn't have anybody do that for me. I kind of had to learn it the hard way, which is probably some of the best lessons. But I embrace any chance I have to do this, and I've done a lot of TV, get to still do a lot of radio, still get to write when I want, and do a lot of social media. But this in itself is very, very unique, and I enjoy it. And I echo Travis's statement. I appreciate the chance to do this.
Yeah, it's and for me it's fun because I get to talk to you guys and learn from you guys. It's just like what Joey said, to echo it. I mean, everybody, you're always learning from somebody else, and I think the more you fish with, the more you listen to others. In most cases, you pick up a lot of knowledge, whether it's watching their hands or seeing how they do something, or seeing, even if you're in the boat with somebody, just seeing the items that they're throwing to as they go throughout their routine. There's something to be learned from that. And it's a great thing to do. So anytime that you can go fishing with someone, kayaks and whatever, fish with them, go with somebody, hang out, learn. That you'll learn a lot. And if you can get in a team tournament, even on the big boat side, or a team event, go do it. It's some of the best learning that you can pick up, especially when you get to fish with guys like Joey and Travis here. When I was a younger guy, I had a couple dudes that took me under their wing, and I learned so much from them guys. And there's still times I'll call them up, be like, hey, what's going on out there? And they share that knowledge, and that's amazing to have those connections and build that through fishing is really a special opportunity. And through Jackson Kayak, that's what we want to do for you guys at home. And I think it means a lot to the three of us and the rest of our teammates that frequent this show, that you come on, listen, and learn.
I had a guy call me one time. He had read my first book, and he called me from the water, and he said, here's what I'm looking at. And I said, go to the back. I said, it was October. I said, the bait always goes to the back of the creeks in October. Go to the back of the creek, pick you up a willow leaf spinner bait, and throw it around the grass beds in the wood. The guy called me back later, and they said, the first cast I made, I caught a fish, and I caught 12 more just doing what you said. That's a win. That's when you really feel a
Absolutely.
sense of accomplishment.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That is awesome. And the new book is due out by the end of the week, you say?
By the end of the week, yeah, we're really excited about that. Now, I've got the foreword was written by Bill Dance. If you don't know who he is, you've probably been freeze dried or in prison for a little while. And another good friend of mine contributed, Michael Vines, and it's got a ton of pictures in it. It's got a bunch of pictures in it that are proof that big bass come from following this. And you guys could have probably written the same book. I just had more time to do it.
Couldn't have written it better than you. Number one, I can't read. Didn't know that, did you? I'm still waiting on the books on tape. I want you to come read it to me. I want you and the book on tape.
Yeah, I'll put my crayons down and come see you.
There you go. You're welcome anytime. Anybody's welcome. So yeah, with that being said, thank you guys at home for watching. Thank you guys for listening. And we will see you back here in 2 weeks. We'll have another one-on-one episode. Got Joshua Evans planned. He'll be coming on doing a live podcast, basscast, whatever you guys want to call it, with us. We'll get to know a little bit more about Joshua and kind of his upbringing through fishing. So yeah, with that being said, we will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good night.